This shocking Vikings trade update is absolutely absurd, with Adam Schefter and other insiders revealing a massive impending trade that could see the return of a huge name back in purple and gold threads. We're going to be breaking down all that in this episode of Vikings Digest, but first make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you don't miss any and all updates, as we are a day away from the NFL draft. And with that, let's hop straight into the first topic and only topic today, which is absurd trade update. So we saw in a report from Adam Schefter of ESPN reporting this week that Atlanta wants a trade partner to pay $20 million of the remaining guaranteed money left on Cousins' contract. He named the Steelers and Vikings as possible trade partners who might be willing to pay $10 million. He expanded on it further with a full quote here if you want to pause it and take a read. If not, I'll read it here for you, saying that there's a feeling around the league that a team, whether it is the Vikings or Steelers, might be willing to pay down roughly $10 million. How much any team will be willing to pay also would influence the compensation it gives up. The higher the payment, the lower the draft compensation. The lower the payment, the higher the draft compensation. The Falcons and Cousins, who has a no trade clause, recognize their future is not together, and how it will play out could very well be influenced by this draft. So we saw how Kirk Cousins, he left Minnesota. Atlanta gave him the massive contract that they did, guaranteeing him so much money. But now you have, just not even a season later, after they drafted Michael Penix, where they knew, much like how Sam Darnold turned into a pumpkin for us, Cinderella turned back into a pumpkin for the Atlanta Falcons just a lot sooner than Sam Darnold did. And they did have the foresight of drafting a quarterback that would be the successor. They just didn't think it would be as soon as it was. And it was just a matter of a season once Cousins was just wavering a lot and then Michael Penix took over. Now, did I ever think that we would be talking about Kirk Cousins coming back to Minnesota? Absolutely not. Didn't even think that would be a thought in my mind. I thought that he was just going to play out the rest of his days in Atlanta. And then when Michael Penix took over, I thought he would just be a very expensive backup. Or once free agency hit, that's when everyone just started kind of rushing towards the Kirk Cousins rumors of, hey, he could be getting traded just because of how much they'd be paying him to just be holding the clipboard, and other teams might need him, and he doesn't want to go to a team with a young quarterback. And that's where Diana Rossini comes into play as well, via The Athletic, a Vikings reporter, talking on how the Browns, Steelers, and possibly Vikings could be involved in a Cousins trade. Minnesota is looked at as the least likely scenario given its preference for JJ McCarthy, and that Cousins would need to sign off on any trade he is involved in. It's believed that Cousins would be against any trade that involves sending him to a situation involving a young QB, similar to the situation he faced in Atlanta last year. If a trade were to happen, however, I would expect it to go down on Saturday. Now, on Saturday, any picks you would get for him seem to be either for next year if they're early round picks or late round picks this year, which is insane that that's all that the Falcons would be getting for Cousins, on top of contract compensation as well, of paying off some of his guaranteed money. But it's insane that a guy that was getting paid that much money with the best agent in the world, because he was not worth that amount of money, Minnesota realized that after 6 years and saying, okay, we need to move on from this. Let Atlanta foot the bill for this and just pay a bunch of money for it. And that's what Atlanta did. Now, a year later, they're just trying to get rid of it and just saying, hey, we can't take on this dead cap. Somebody, please take on some of it for us. And now, if teams are going to be willing to pay for $10 million, they might be listening. But if teams are willing to pay $20 million and they don't have to give up that much draft capital, they're going to want to have to listen to those calls. And that's where I think Minnesota, thankfully, will dodge a bullet in that sense. However, that being said, is one thing I want to look at is, as much as Kirk Cousins, it didn't translate into a lot of playoff wins, barely any at that matter, didn't translate to a Super Bowl, which is what we wanted to bring him in here for. He was very much loved by this fan base for the most part. There is a few that didn't like him, and there was a lot that did hate him. However, when his Achilles injury happened, we saw this city and this team and fan base really rally behind him, saying, hey, we know you're not playing, but we still love you. We still want you to see you here, and we still hope that you will be our quarterback, even when they knew that he was probably going to be leaving after that contract year. So with that, Minnesota fans, they still love Kirk Cousins. Justin Jefferson, he still loves Kirk Cousins. He won Offensive Player of the Year with Kirk Cousins as well. So yeah, there's a lot of chemistry there. And yes, it would suck for him to go to a team where he isn't able to start. I still think Kirk Cousins has some ball left in him, probably more than Aaron Rodgers has left in him. And it wouldn't be a situation where he would be guaranteed to start. JJ McCarthy very much has the keys to the car at this point, even though Minnesota isn't officially saying it with other teams needing a quarterback more, the Steelers and the Browns primarily, potentially even the Saints if they don't get Shedeur Sanders in the draft early on, that's going to be a situation where those teams might be willing to take on a bit more of the contract money so that Atlanta can just kind of breathe a bit easier and not have to worry about paying him as much without him even being on the roster. So that's where Minnesota could lose out only with $16 million in cap space left. And do you really want to do that to bring in Kirk Cousins, who's just going to be holding a clipboard for JJ McCarthy, or being a very expensive insurance policy for him? I still think you go out and get a guy like Drew Lock, or as much as I hate to say it, Carson Wentz. Even though on paper and skill level, Kirk Cousins might be better than Carson Wentz, it's just the price that they would each be coming in at. That's where it becomes problematic for Minnesota. However, I still think Drew Lock is the best option out there for Minnesota as a backup quarterback. But what do you guys think about all that as well? And what do you guys think about the possibility of, if the Steelers wind up with Cousins, would that leave Rodgers lingering in free agency with very few options and possibly come to Minnesota? Let us know what you guys have to say down in the comments below. And would you guys want to see Kirk Cousins come to Minnesota? I know we talk about all the time how JJ McCarthy, he is the future of this team. But Kirk Cousins, I think, yes, like I said, he still has some ball left in him. And with Kevin O'Connell, he had some great years with him. But this would be a very, very expensive insurance policy that I don't know if Minnesota can afford to take on. And the fact that we're even talking about this, like I said, this is insane that he could be coming back to Minnesota. But again, I don't think this is going to happen. I think the Steelers, with Kevin Stefanski already being there and having already that chemistry with Kirk Cousins, like the article was saying as well, and just like everyone has been saying from the start of free agency, whenever we saw Cleveland not really snatch up a quarterback, they didn't go out and get Russell Wilson. They didn't go out and get a few other guys. They didn't go out and get anybody except extending Myles Garrett when he wanted to trade out of there. So it seems like Cleveland, they have a plan for maybe what they want to do at quarterback. Does that include Kirk Cousins? It seems like if it hasn't included Kirk Cousins by this point, it probably won't. So they're probably going to try and draft a quarterback. But if they don't draft a quarterback, that's when we could see this kind of happen with Cousins, whether it's the Browns, whether it's the Steelers, whether it's the Saints. It all depends on how those first 10 picks go on Thursday in the NFL draft, which is going to be very highly anticipated. Interesting to see what the Minnesota Vikings do at the 24 pick as well, or if we trade back, because we've seen so many reports of Minnesota trading back or potentially making a trade. Jalen Ramsey one thrown out there, maybe signing Mike Hilton, maybe, who knows. There is a lot of moves left to do for Minnesota, and I definitely think Kwesi has some tricks up his sleeve. I just don't think Kirk Cousins is going to be one of those tricks that he has ready to pull out, saying, hey, look at what this is. This is what my mastery is. I don't think that's going to be the case here. I don't think he's going to want to gamble away future picks for a guy that he just got rid of. It would just be insane at this point to think that would be a possibility. But this is the NFL. Crazier things have happened. I still think I'm going to preach it, and as much as Kirk would agree with me as well, Drew Lock probably is the best option out there at QB2 for Minnesota, because that's still a guy that he's not going to cost a lot of money. He's not expecting to be a starting quarterback necessarily, even though he knows he can be a starting quarterback, but it does give him an opportunity to be a very great insurance policy that won't break the bank, still can just bring in a lot of skill, mobility, and fit in this Vikings offense, because that is also the big thing I think with this, is that I don't think Kirk Cousins would fit in this offense anymore. I know he fit in it before, but that was before the Achilles injury. That was before he lost a lot of mobility and lost his step. We really saw that in Atlanta this season, where he wasn't able to land on that back foot as much or lean on it for that power that he was able to get on deep throws. Yeah, he was hitting up Darnell Mooney a little bit. However, we didn't see him take as many deep shots as he was with Minnesota, or having as much confidence in his throw, in his motions, or in just anything in general. His confidence was just completely shot by the middle of the season, to the point where Michael Penix took over. So with that, I don't think Kirk Cousins necessarily fits this offense anymore, regardless of the chemistry that he would have with certain guys, because I think physically he has lost a step, and that step is something that is very critical for this Vikings offense, with a lot of play actions, a lot of bootlegs, and Drew Lock would be the perfect one for that in a QB2 spot, or in a temporary QB1 situation if JJ isn't fully ready by the start of the regular season, or does face some sort of setbacks where he misses a game here and there throughout the season. But what do you guys think about all that as well? Would you rather have Kirk Cousins or Drew Lock as your QB2 for next season. Let us know what you guys have to say down in the comments below, and stay tuned for all the stuff coming up with the draft. It's going to be a big draft week. I know Minnesota doesn't have as many picks as we normally would like to see them have, or they normally do have. However, Kwesi, like I said, will probably still have some tricks up his sleeve for something on draft day for us to enjoy. But that's going to do it for this episode of Vikings Digest. I've been your host, Griffen. Take care.